Nearly all first-time visitors to the old American city of Philadelphia want to see one thing: a bell, a big bell called the Liberty Bell. It has been there since 1753. The one thing everyone notices about the Liberty Bell is that it's cracked. Because of its large crack, it can no longer be rung. No one is quite sure when that crack first appeared, but it seems that at least by 1835 it was quite cracked, and that by 1846 it was completely, irreparably cracked. In 1970, an American club called the Procrastinators Club wrote a letter to the Whitechapel Foundry in England, which had made the Liberty Bell in 1753. They demanded a refund for this bell, which cracked in 1835. The foundry responded and said they would be very happy to send a refund for the bell, provided it be returned in its original packaging. Liberty is something we all thirst for. There was a famous old slave by the name of Mother Bet, or Mum Bet, born around 1742 in Massachusetts as a slave. When the Massachusetts Constitution was written around 1780, she heard its words saying that all people are born equal and everyone has the right to be free. So Mum Bet went to a famous lawyer by the name of Theodore Sedgwick and said to him, "Sir, I have just heard a paper read that tells me all of us are born equal and each of us has a right to be free. Can't the law give me my freedom?" Judge Sedgwick looked at her and said, "Yes, I believe it can." He pressed the case in court and won for her freedom, making her the first slave to be freed in Massachusetts. She later said, "Always, always, during my years of slavery, if I had been offered just 1 minute of freedom, and if I had been told that at the end of that minute I would have to die, I would take it, just to live 1 minute on God's earth as a free woman." So intense is the thirst for freedom in the heart of every person born. I can understand that. Years ago, I was living behind the Iron Curtain under communism. One day I was on a train. Sharing the compartment with me was a young soldier serving in the army. We got to talking quite a bit and became somewhat friends. I asked him, "Is there anything I can send you when I return to America?" He looked at me and said, "Yes, send me a bottle of free air, so that once in my life I may fill my lungs with it." So intense is our desire for freedom. We seek freedom our whole life long. Yet the freedom we find is always flawed. The Liberty Bell is always cracked. If we look at the history of our own nation, we see that freedom has been flawed from the very beginning, for it was denied to an entire race and was not given to them until 1863. The Founding Fathers knew very well that this freedom was very flawed, but it was a beginning. Women were not given the right to vote until well into the 20th century. The freedom was flawed. The Liberty Bell was cracked. Many people did not gain civil rights until the 1960s and after. freedom was flawed. The Liberty Bell was cracked. Other groups to this day are still seeking their freedom and their equal rights. We all find that the freedom we so intensely seek is always flawed. The Liberty Bell is always cracked. We never discover true freedom here on this earth. We find people in our own day who would willingly give up freedom in exchange for security. Even the founding fathers were confronted with that attitude. And the wise old sage Benjamin Franklin said, "Any society that would give up a little freedom in exchange for a little security deserves neither and will lose both." What a prophet he was. Freedom is flawed. The Liberty Bell is always cracked. We see that in our own lives. None of us has the freedom to do exactly what we want to do. Earlier in life, none of us has the money to do what we want to do, so our freedom is flawed. The Liberty Bell is cracked. Later in life, when we maybe have a little more money to do those things, we lose our freedom of movement because our knees don't want to move anymore. Our legs don't want to take us where we'd like to go. Our freedom is flawed. The Liberty Bell is cracked. We want to do so many things. We have so many dreams. But then we take on a job, and because of lack of time, because of our responsibilities, we have no freedom to do what we'd like to do. Our freedom is once again flawed. The Liberty Bell we once again find to be cracked. Some people get married, and then they lose all their freedom because they have taken on the responsibilities of family life and are no longer able to live as free, single people, doing what they want to do. The freedom is incomplete, flawed. The Liberty Bell is cracked. Yet we continue to desire that freedom intensely, never quite finding it here on earth. Let's return to that old freed slave, Mum Bet. The first thing she did after gaining her freedom was to take on a new name. Significantly, she chose the name Elizabeth Freeman. The second thing she did was to take on a new yoke. Just released from the yoke of slavery, she now took on a new one. She went back to the lawyer who had helped her gain her freedom and asked to be a servant in his household, not as a slave this time, but as a cherished family member. She became like a mother to his children. From that moment on, she became renowned as an excellent healer, midwife, and nurse. As in every generation, all of us try to put off the yoke of tyranny, the yoke of oppression, the yoke of inequality, the yoke of slavery in all its forms. But paradoxically, and isn't every truth a paradox? In order to find our freedom, we must take upon our shoulders a new yoke. Jesus tells us, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden light." In order finally to find an uncracked Liberty Bell, in order finally to find unlimited, unflawed freedom, we must take up the yoke of Christ, the yoke of humility, the yoke of burning love, the yoke of God, not as a slave any longer, but as a beloved family member. Only then, under the yoke of love, the yoke of humility, the sweet yoke of God, do we find the uncracked bell. Only then do we find the perfect freedom of the children of God.